A quiet afternoon and a best friend. The late afternoon sun, a benevolent golden wash, spilled across Mr. Henderson's porch, warming the aged timber and coaxing the resinous scent of pine from the nearby woods. He settled onto the old swing, its rhythmic sigh a familiar counterpoint to the cicada's ceaseless hum. Usually, his gaze drifted towards the distant horizon, but today it was tethered closer, tracing the erratic dance of a small, almost translucent monarch. The butterfly performed a weightless jig above the overgrown lavender, its wings, like fractured stained glass, catching the light. Buddy, a magnificent German shepherd with fur the color of a moonless night, observed the insect with an intense focus that belied his usual placidity. His thick, plumed tail gave a subtle, almost imperceptible twitch. Then, with a sudden burst of energy that startled a dozing robin, he launched himself forward. No bark, no growl, just a powerful lope after the insect. His movements fluid and resolute, a dark blur against the emerald lawn. The butterfly, unperturbed, spiraled higher, teasing him with delicate, unpredictable flutters. Buddy made a playful snap at the empty air, a soft puff escaping his nostrils, before sinking back onto his haunches, watching its ascent until it vanished beyond the roofline. Mr. Henderson chuckled, a dry, warm sound that rarely escaped his lips. Hearing it, Buddy swiveled his head, ears orienting forward like radar dishes. He trotted back to the porch, his paws making soft thuds on the wooden planks. Without a sound, he nudged Mr. Henderson's knee with a cool, wet nose, a silent plea for acknowledgement. The old man's hand, gnarled by years but still capable, descended to scratch behind Buddy's ears, finding that perfect spot that made the dog lean into the contact with a blissful sigh. Then, with an almost human understanding of kinship, Buddy laid his large head on Mr. Henderson's lap. The substantial weight was a grounding presence, quieting the old man's often restless spirit. Buddy's eyes, intelligent pools of dark amber, looked up at him, a silent query, a deep, unspoken loyalty radiating from their depths. Mr. Henderson stroked the soft fur along Buddy's jowls, feeling the warmth of his breath against his trousers. He remembered the day he'd first encountered Buddy, a scrawny pup, all gangly limbs and oversized ears, shivering in the shelter. There had been an immediate connection, a quiet understanding that transcended species. Buddy had seemed to peer into his soul, past the taciturn exterior, to the echoes of battles fought and comrades lost. He had seen the man beneath the uniform, the heart that still ached, even after all these years. Buddy wasn't merely a pet, not in the conventional sense. He was a sentinel, a confidant, a four-legged anchor in a world that often felt adrift. He was a constant reminder of duty, of unwavering loyalty, of the profound simplicity in a steadfast presence. In the quiet hours, when memories pressed in like an unseasonable fog, Buddy would often come and rest his head on Mr. Henderson's chest, a silent offering of comfort that spoke volumes. The dog seemed to possess an innate ability to sense the ebb and flow of Mr. Henderson's moods, providing solace without a sound. Mr. Henderson closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the weight of Buddy's head, the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing. He reflected on all the years they had shared, the walks through the woods, the quiet evenings by the fire, the unspoken conversations that filled the air between them. Buddy had seen him through more than just the quiet afternoons. He'd been there during the long nights of insomnia, the anniversaries of unspeakable losses, the moments when the world felt too heavy to bear. There were times, Mr. Henderson knew, when his reserved nature made him seem unapproachable to others. He wasn't one for grand declarations or effusive displays of emotion. But with Buddy, words were unnecessary. Their bond was woven into the very fabric of their shared existence, a tapestry of mutual respect, understanding, and profound affection. It manifested in the way Buddy nudged his hand when he forgot to eat, the way he would stand protectively between Mr. Henderson and an unfamiliar delivery driver, the way he would simply be there. He opened his eyes again, looking down at the noble head resting on his lap. A faint scar, a relic of some forgotten skirmish from Buddy's own youth, ran across his left ear. It was a minor imperfection on a creature Mr. Henderson considered flawless in every way that mattered. The sun dipped a little lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil. Buddy let out a soft sigh, shifting slightly. He lifted his head, nudging Mr. Henderson's hand once more, then gently licked his palm, a warm, rough gesture of affection. Mr. Henderson returned the gesture, scratching Buddy's chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath his fingers. He imagined a future without this faithful companion, and a chill, colder than the evening air, traced down his spine. It was a thought he quickly dismissed, pushing it back into the shadowy corners of his mind. Today, there was only the tranquil afternoon, the warm sun, and the comforting weight of his best friend. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that whatever came, whatever challenges the world might throw their way, he and Buddy would face them together. Their bond was a fortress built brick by brick with loyalty and love. For now, though, there was only this peace, this unspoken understanding, and the gentle creak of the porch swing carrying them into the twilight. The knock on the door. The late afternoon sun, previously a warm caress, now seemed to cast long, ominous shadows across the porch. Mr. Henderson, lost in the quiet comfort of Buddy's presence, barely noticed the change until a low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. It was an unfamiliar sound, too heavy for a typical delivery, too slow for a passing car. Buddy, who had been dozing with his head resting on Mr. Henderson's knee, lifted his ears, a soft growl rumbling deep in his chest. His tail, which had been a rhythmic thump against the wood, stilled. A large white truck, emblazoned with the official seal of the City Animal Control, lumbered to a stop at the end of Mr. Henderson's gravel driveway. Its side door, usually a benign entrance for a friendly face, slid open with a hiss, revealing two figures in matching dark blue uniforms. Mr. Henderson felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't had any issues with animal control, ever. Buddy was a model citizen, always leashed on walks, never wandering. He swallowed, a dry, uncomfortable sensation in his throat. The taller of the two officers, a man with a stern face and a neat mustache, approached the porch. "Mr. Henderson?" he asked, his voice clipped and official. Mr. Henderson slowly rose, Buddy staying close, his body pressed against the old man's leg, a silent sentinel. "That's me," he replied, his voice a little rougher than he intended. "Officer Miller, City Animal Control," the man stated, producing an ID badge. "We're here regarding a complaint filed against your dog." "A complaint?" Mr. Henderson blinked, bewildered. "Buddy?" What kind of complaint? Officer Miller consulted a clipboard he held. We have reports of a large German Shepherd exhibiting aggressive behavior, specifically concerning children in the neighborhood. Several parents have expressed fear for their children's safety. Mr. Henderson's gaze flickered to Buddy, who was now standing alert, his gaze fixed on the officers, an intelligent curiosity in his eyes. No hint of aggression. Aggressive? Buddy wouldn't hurt a fly. He's gentle, especially with kids. The neighborhood children often come to the fence to pet him. We understand your loyalty to your pet, sir. The other officer, a younger woman, interjected, her tone a touch softer than Miller's. But these are serious allegations. We have no choice but to investigate. Investigate? Mr. Henderson echoed, the knot in his stomach tightening further. You mean, talk to me? Ask around? I can assure you there's been a mistake. Officer Miller sighed, a hint of impatience in the sound. Mr. Henderson, due to the nature and number of the complaints, and given the breed of the animal, we are required to confiscate the dog for a mandatory observation period. It's protocol. The words hit Mr. Henderson with the force of a physical blow. Confiscate? Take Buddy away? He felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him feeling lightheaded. He looked down at Buddy, whose ears were now slightly drooped, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden tension. No, Mr. Henderson whispered, the single word a raw protest torn from his chest. You can't. He's not aggressive. He's never been aggressive. He's all I have. Officer Miller's expression remained unyielding. I understand this is difficult, sir, but we have a warrant. We're simply doing our job. He gestured to the second officer, who produced a leash and a pole with a loop at the end. A cold wave of dread washed over Mr. Henderson. He felt a tremor run through Buddy's body as the officers moved closer. The German Shepherd looked up at Mr. Henderson, a question in his intelligent eyes, an unspoken plea. The old man wanted to wrap his arms around his dog, to shield him from this injustice, but his limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. Please, Mr. Henderson pleaded, his voice cracking. Just let me explain. Let me show you how he is with children. This is a misunderstanding, a terrible mistake. Officer Miller shook his head. The complaints specify multiple incidents, Mr. Henderson. We've been instructed to bring the animal in. Any resistance will only complicate matters. The younger officer slowly approached Buddy, the loophole extended. Buddy, usually so trusting, let out a low, guttural growl, a sound Mr. Henderson had rarely heard. It was a warning, a protective instinct surfacing. Buddy, no, Mr. Henderson murmured, his hand finding the fur on the dog's neck, a silent promise of comfort. He met Officer Miller's gaze, a quiet agony in his own. He's a good boy. He's saved lives. The words hung in the air, seemingly lost on the unyielding officers. With a heavy heart, Mr. Henderson knew he couldn't fight them. He couldn't put Buddy through that. The quiet pain etched on his face was a testament to the depth of his bond with the dog, a silent surrender to an unimaginable loss. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his fingers still buried in Buddy's fur. He squeezed, a farewell in the gesture. Go on, boy, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Be good. Buddy looked at him one last time, a flicker of confusion and sorrow in his eyes, before allowing the younger officer to gently secure the leash around his neck. As Buddy was led away, his powerful frame now appearing strangely diminished, Mr. Henderson felt a gaping void open in his chest, a cold emptiness where warmth and companionship had resided just moments before. The rumble of the animal control truck faded into the distance, leaving behind a profound silence that echoed with the absence of a loyal friend. A trembling goodbye. The crisp autumn air, usually a balm to Mr. Henderson's worn joints, now felt like a cold, sharp blade. He stood on his porch, a silent sentinel of sorrow, watching the two animal control officers approach Buddy. The German shepherd, ever the picture of canine grace, sat patiently by the rose bush, a plume of a tail wagging a slow, rhythmic beat against the dry leaves. Buddy's intelligent eyes, the color of warm molasses, fixed on Mr. Henderson, a question in their depths, a gentle eagerness. He was utterly oblivious, a loyal companion simply waiting for his next command, a treat, a comforting scratch behind the ears. The injustice of it all twisted a knot in Mr. Henderson's chest, tightening with each measured step the officers took. "All right, boy." Officer Miller's voice was flat, devoid of emotion as she knelt. Her partner, a younger man with a nervous fidget in his hands, held the lead. Mr. Henderson's gaze, however, was solely on Buddy. He wanted to call out, to reassure his friend, to explain that this wasn't right, that this wasn't how things were supposed to be. But the words caught in his throat, choked by the lump of grief that had solidified there. He knew with a chilling certainty that any outburst would only complicate matters, perhaps even put Buddy at greater risk. His quiet dignity, honed over decades of facing adversity, was the only armor he had left. As Officer Miller produced a thick nylon leash, Mr. Henderson's hands, usually steady from years of careful carpentry and tending his garden, began to tremble. A subtle, internal tremor that no one else would notice, but one that resonated through his very bones. He clasped them together, trying to still the involuntary movement, to project an outward calm he didn't feel. The younger officer, avoiding Mr. Henderson's eyes, quickly secured the leash to Buddy's collar. Buddy offered no resistance, only a curious tilt of his head, a soft huff as if asking, "Are we going for a walk then?" The sight pierced Mr. Henderson's heart with an agonizing precision. Buddy, ever trusting, ever compliant. This was not the vicious beast described in the complaints, not the aggressive animal the warrant claimed. This was his Buddy, a gentle soul, a silent confidant, a protector who had only ever offered unwavering loyalty. "All right, Mr. Henderson, we'll be taking him now," Officer Miller said, her voice cutting through the thick silence. She gave a brisk tug on the leash, and Buddy, after one last, hopeful glance at Mr. Henderson, began to walk alongside her. The younger officer walked slightly behind, his gaze fixed on the ground. Mr. Henderson remained rooted to the spot, his eyes locked on Buddy. Every fiber of his being screamed to intervene, to fight, to snatch Buddy back. But the futility of such an action, the stark reality of the warrant and the officer's authority, held him captive. He watched Buddy's retreating form, the familiar gait, the way his tail still gave an occasional, hopeful wag. As they reached the animal control vehicle, a nondescript white van with barred windows, Buddy paused. He turned his head, his warm brown eyes seeking out Mr. Henderson one last time. There was no fear in them, only a deep, abiding sorrow, a confusion that mirrored Mr. Henderson's own. It was a silent, aching plea, a question that hung heavy in the air between them. Why? Mr. Henderson met his gaze, his own eyes brimming with unshed tears, a silent promise of return, a desperate farewell. He managed a barely perceptible nod, a gesture he hoped conveyed all the love and reassurance he couldn't vocalize. Officer Miller opened the rear door of the van, and Buddy, after one last lingering look over his shoulder, stepped inside. The door clanged shut with a sickening finality, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the street. Mr. Henderson watched as Officer Miller and her partner got into the front seats. The engine rumbled to life, a low growl that seemed to mock the quiet peace of the neighborhood. The van pulled away slowly, turning down the street. Mr. Henderson remained on his porch, his gaze fixed on the vehicle until it was just a distant speck, then gone entirely. The rose bush, usually a source of quiet joy, now seemed to mock him with its vibrant blooms. The autumn leaves, once a golden carpet, now seemed to mock him with their cheerful rustle. The silence left behind was deafening, a hollow space where Buddy's gentle presence had been. His hands still trembled, a physical manifestation of the chasm that had just opened in his life. A trembling goodbye indeed. An empty house. The door's soft click resonated, a final hollow punctuation mark in the sudden, vast silence that engulfed the porch. Mr. Henderson remained rooted, a monument of grief, long after the animal control van had vanished beyond the distant bend. The familiar scent of damp earth and distant pine, usually a soothing balm, now mocked him, shorn of the comforting dog and dirt musk that had always clung to Buddy's fur. His hands, still quivering slightly from the effort of feigned composure, felt strangely light, bereft of the leash's reassuring pull, the weight of a pat, the familiar scratch behind an ear. He finally turned, the porch boards groaning a soft protest under his weight, a sound that, in another life, would have summoned Buddy trotting to greet him. The house ahead loomed, an unlit abyss. Each step across the threshold felt like wading through a viscous, invisible medium. The worn entryway rug, once a canvas for Buddy's winter shedding, lay pristine, swept clean by his profound absence. In the living room, a sunbeam spilled across the faded armchair, illuminating dust motes that danced in the quiet air. He sank into its embrace, the old springs sighing beneath him. His gaze settled on the plush, circular dog bed nestled beside the chair. Buddy's bed. It still bore the faint impression of his body, a ghost of comfort. Mr. Henderson reached out, his fingers tracing the soft, matted fabric, smoothed by countless hours of contented canine slumber. He stroked it, slowly, rhythmically, as if ministering to a small, vulnerable creature. The fabric was warm from the sun, yet offered no solace to his chilled heart. The silence within the house was a tangible weight, pressing in, heavy and suffocating. No gentle thump, thump, thump of a tail greeted him. No contented sigh from a dozing dog. He strained to hear the familiar, rhythmic cadence of Buddy's snores, a low rumble that had been the steady accompaniment to his quiet evenings. Nothing. Not even the delicate click of paws on the hardwood floors, as Buddy once padded from room to room, investigating shadows, asserting his quiet guardianship. The air felt thin, stripped of the vibrant energy that had always hummed beneath the surface when Buddy was near. He found himself wandering, a silent patrol. In the kitchen, the empty food bowl, scrubbed, sterile, sat on the mat. No eager ears perked at the rustle of the kibble bag. No insistent nudge against his leg when he prepared his own meager meals. The back door, once a launch pad for Buddy's enthusiastic forays into the yard, stood closed. The world outside now a desolate expanse. Later, as dusk bled purple into the sky, Mr. Henderson settled back into his armchair. He picked up a photo album from the end table, its leather cover cracked with age. He turned the brittle pages, past faded images of his youth, his time in uniform, his late wife's luminous smile. His fingers paused on a picture of Buddy as a pup, a fluffy, clumsy ball of mischief, his ears comically oversized for his head. Another showed Buddy, sleek and powerful, mid-leap over a fallen log, his eyes alight with boundless joy. He wasn't dwelling on specific memories, not precisely. He wasn't reliving the past, but rather grappling with the profound emptiness of the present. The photos were simply proof that Buddy had been, that his vibrant presence wasn't a figment of his aching imagination. He closed his eyes. The image of Buddy's trusting face, those soft brown eyes, burned into his mind. The house was not merely empty, it was hollowed out, a vessel from which the most precious cargo had been cruelly removed. The quiet stretched, endless and unforgiving, a stark reminder of the solitary vigil he now kept. A reporter's instinct. The city desk thrummed with its usual late-afternoon symphony of chaos. Phones trilling, keys clicking, a low tide of conversation ebbing and flowing beneath the crackle of the police scanner. Lily Chen, perched precariously on the edge of her well-worn chair, scrolled through an endless digital current of mundane civic announcements and forgotten community tidbits. Her beat, local interest, often felt like a polite fiction for page fillers and narrative leftovers. Most days, it was a quiet struggle against the unremarkable. Then, a flicker. A brief, almost insignificant blurb from the animal control blotter drifted by. German Shepherd confiscated. Owner cited for neglect. Lily paused, her thumb hovering. Neglect. A common enough charge, yet its stark brevity caught her attention. She clicked, pulling up the full, albeit sparse, report. The address, 472 Willow Creek Lane. An older district, canopied by trees, hushed and unassuming. The owner, Arthur Henderson. No prior incidents, no complaints on file. The German Shepherd named Buddy was described as unruly and potentially aggressive. Lily's brow furrowed, a slight crease forming. Unruly and aggressive struck her as subjective labels, often interchangeable with large and protective. Her own rescue terrier, a small tempest of boundless energy and unwarranted barks, could easily be deemed unruly by a stranger. A grainy, quickly snapped photograph accompanied the document. It depicted a magnificent German Shepherd, ears slightly lowered, eyes wide with what seemed less like menace and more like profound confusion. Behind the dog, a sliver of an elderly man's hand, gnarled and trembling, reached out as if in a desperate, silent plea. The image was fleeting, an almost accidental detail in the digital file, but it resonated deeply with Lily. She'd grown up surrounded by animals, understood the unspoken language of their fear and their fierce loyalty. This dog didn't look aggressive. It looked utterly lost. "Anything stirring, Chen?" Mark, the features editor, called from across the newsroom, perpetually entombed beneath a mountain of half-eaten Danish pastries and unopened press releases. Lily shook her head, though her gaze remained anchored to the photo. "Just another animal control report. German Shepherd taken. Owner cited for neglect." Mark grunted, clearly uninspired. "Standard procedure. Move along." But Lily couldn't dismiss it. Her journalistic gut instinct, a low, insistent thrum she'd learned to heed, whispered that there was more beneath the surface. The swift confiscation, the lack of detail, the immediate leap to neglect for an owner with no prior record, it all felt too pat, too convenient. Animal control wasn't renowned for its subtle touch, but this felt particularly heavy-handed. She scrolled back, rereading the terse lines, searching for any further context. There was none. A closed case, a done deal. But the image of the dog's bewildered eyes and the tremor in that reaching hand clung to her mind. She thought of her own grandfather, a man who cherished his aging cat more than most people. The idea of his companion being snatched away under dubious circumstances ignited a fierce, protective spark within her. Lily pushed away from her desk, the chair's squeak a small punctuation in the expansive room. She walked to the communal whiteboard, where the day's assignments were scrawled in various marker hues. Her name sat next to City Council Budget Meeting, 3 p.m. A dull, predictable affair. She grabbed a fresh marker and, with a decisive stroke, drew a line through her name by the meeting. Below it, she scrawled, "Investigate Animal Control, Willow Creek Lane." Mark finally looked up, a pastry crumb clinging to his mustache. "Chen, what are you doing? The budget meeting is crucial." Lily turned, her expression earnest. "Mark, something feels off here. A quiet man, an old neighborhood, a sudden neglect charge for a dog that seems more scared than dangerous. My gut says there's a real story here, not just another procedural blurb." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We don't have the bandwidth for speculative deep dives, Lily, especially not for dog stories." "It's not just a dog story, Mark," Lily countered, her voice firm. "It's about potential injustice, about a system that might be steamrolling a quiet citizen. Isn't that exactly what we're here to do? Hold power accountable?" Mark studied her for a long moment, seeing the determined glint in her eyes, that familiar spark of conviction that, while sometimes inconvenient, often unearthed compelling narratives. He recognized the signs when she had the bit between her teeth. "Fine," he conceded, waving a dismissive hand. "But if you come back with nothing but a sad dog tale, you're on coffee duty for a month." A faint smile touched Lily's lips. "Deal." She scooped up her notepad and a pen, their familiar weight a comfort. Her car keys jingled in her hand. The Willow Creek Lane address wasn't far. She had a strong premonition that Mr. Henderson would have a significantly different version of events to share. First clues. The address led Lily to a small, unassuming house, its paint peeling in places, a solitary mailbox leaning slightly to one side. A faded welcome mat, worn thin by countless footsteps, seemed to mock the palpable emptiness emanating from within. As Lily approached the front door, a profound stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant caw of a crow. She knocked gently, the sound echoing a little too loudly in the quiet afternoon. It took a moment, then the door creaked open, revealing Mr. Henderson. He was a man carved from quiet sorrow, his shoulders stooped, eyes a cloudy gray that seemed to hold the weight of unspoken grief. A threadbare cardigan hung loosely on his thin frame, and his hands, gnarled with age, fidgeted at his sides. There was no aggression in his posture, only an immense, weary sadness that pricked at Lily's journalistic detachment. "Mr. Henderson? I'm Lily Chen from the Daily Herald," she began, her voice softer than usual. "I'm here about Buddy." He nodded slowly, a barely perceptible dip of his head. "Come in, Miss Chen." His voice was raspy, unused. The interior of the house was meticulously tidy, yet felt utterly desolate. Every object seemed to be exactly where it belonged, as if frozen in time. The air was cool, carrying the faint, comforting scent of old books and something else, a lingering echo of dog. Lily's gaze drifted to a worn armchair by a sun-drenched window, a hollow indent in its cushion speaking volumes. "Please, have a seat," Mr. Henderson offered, gesturing vaguely towards a simple wooden chair. He settled himself on a faded sofa, his posture stiff, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I read the report," Lily started, choosing her words carefully. "About Buddy being taken. I wanted to understand what happened." He looked out the window, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. "They said neglect." A bitter taste seemed to enter the word as he spoke it. "Buddy was never neglected. Never." His voice cracked on the last word, and he cleared his throat, averting his eyes. Lily noticed the framed photos on a small side table, family portraits, landscapes, and then a collection dedicated solely to a German shepherd. She pointed to them. "Would you mind if I—" He nodded, a flicker of something almost akin to warmth touching his eyes. He was a good dog. Lily picked up a few. There was Buddy as a playful pup, all gangly limbs and oversized paws, chewing on a slipper. Another showed him majestically poised on a mountain trail, ears pricked, the wind ruffling his fur. But one photo truly caught her eye. A younger Mr. Henderson, his face etched with the lean intensity of youth, kneeling beside a very young German shepherd puppy, both of them beaming. The man in the photo radiated a quiet strength, a stark contrast to the hollowed-out figure before her. "This one," Lily said, holding up the puppy photo. "He looks so young here." A faint, wistful smile touched Mr. Henderson's lips, a rare break in his solemn demeanor. "That was a long time ago. He was just a pup, full of mischief." He paused, his gaze distant. "He was special. Not just any dog." Lily's reporter's instinct flared. "Special how?" she prompted gently. Mr. Henderson exhaled slowly, a sound like a deflating balloon. "He just was. From the moment I first saw him, always attentive, always aware." He tapped a finger against his temple. "Smart, too. Smarter than most people give dogs credit for." He didn't elaborate, didn't mention military service, didn't hint at any formal training. He simply stated it as a profound, undeniable truth. Lily sensed a deeper story here, a narrative carefully guarded. The quiet pain in his eyes, the way he spoke of Buddy not as a pet, but as an integral part of his very being. It all pointed to something far more significant than a simple owner-dog relationship. She put the photos back down, the weight of their silent stories settling heavily in the room. "Mr. Henderson," Lily said, her voice earnest, "I believe you. I think there's more to this than what's in the report. I want to help." He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and for a fleeting moment Lily saw a spark of hope, quickly extinguished by the overwhelming tide of his grief. "They won't listen," he mumbled, turning his gaze back to the empty armchair. "They never do." The visit ended shortly after. Lily left the quiet house, the image of Mr. Henderson's profound sadness etched in her mind. The silence of his home, the faded photographs, and his quiet assertion that Buddy was special were more compelling than any official report. This wasn't just a story about animal control. It was a story about a man and his dog, and a connection that ran deeper than she could yet comprehend. And Lily, fueled by a nascent sense of injustice, knew she had only just begun to scratch the surface. A puppy in a faraway land. The clatter of Lily Chen's departure faded, leaving Mr. Henderson in the profound quiet of his home. He sat in his armchair, the worn leather cool beneath his trembling hands, and closed his eyes. The sterile scent of cleaning products still lingered, a faint, alien note in the air, usually thick with Buddy's comforting presence. But now the silence was a vacuum, pulling him back through the decades, to a different kind of dust, a different kind of quiet. The air shimmered with heat, not the gentle warmth of his sunroom, but the oppressive, relentless blaze of a distant desert. The year was etched into his memory, though the exact date blurred at the edges like a photograph left too long in the sun. He was younger then, leaner, his face unlined by grief, etched instead by the constant vigilance of a soldier. The endless expanse of sand stretched around him, broken only by the skeletal remains of ancient structures and the occasional, stubborn cluster of date palms. The sky was an unforgiving blue, the sun a malevolent eye overhead. He remembered the gnawing ache of homesickness, a dull throb beneath the adrenaline. His unit had been on a long patrol, the days blurring into a monotonous cycle of heat, dust, and the ever-present hum of distant conflict. They had set up a temporary camp in the lee of a crumbling mud brick wall, seeking what little shade it offered from the midday sun. He was cleaning his rifle, the familiar click and slide of the mechanism a small comfort in the vast, alien landscape. Then, a flicker of movement at the periphery of his vision. He froze, hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm holstered at his hip. A shadow, small and scuttling, detached itself from the deeper shadows beneath the wall. It was too small for a jackal, too hesitant for a stray dog. His eyes narrowed, tracking the movement. It was a puppy, no bigger than his boot, its fur a matted, sandy brown, its ribs starkly visible beneath the thin coat. It moved with a desperate, jerky gait, its tiny head low, sniffing at the parched earth. Its ears were too large for its head, flopping comically as it took a tentative step, then another. It was utterly alone, a tiny spark of vulnerability in a land that offered no quarter. A pang, sharp and unexpected, pierced through the hardened shell of his military detachment. He watched as the puppy whimpered, a sound so faint it was almost swallowed by the vastness. It lifted its head, its dark eyes wide and full of fear, scanning its surroundings. And then, impossibly, those eyes met his. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, man and beast, an unspoken understanding passing between them across the dusty ground. The puppy's tail, a mere stub, gave a single tentative wag. It was a gesture of pure, unadulterated hope. He slowly lowered his rifle, resting it gently on the sand. "Hey there, little fella," he murmured, his voice rough with disuse. He held out a hand, palm open, empty. The puppy flinched, then took another hesitant step forward. Its tiny nose twitched, catching the scent of him, of something safe in a world of danger. He waited, unmoving, as the puppy slowly, cautiously closed the distance. It was an agonizing minute, stretched taut by anticipation. Finally, the small creature reached his outstretched hand, its wet nose brushing his fingers. A shiver ran through its small body, part fear, part relief. He gently stroked its head, feeling the sharp points of its emerging skull, the surprising softness of its matted fur. "You're a brave one, aren't you?" he whispered. He scooped the tiny creature into his arms, its weight negligible, its heart thrumming a frantic beat against his chest. It immediately burrowed into the crook of his arm, trembling but no longer fighting. He felt a fierce, protective instinct bloom within him, warm and unexpected. He remembered the questioning glances from his fellow soldiers, the gruff warnings about parasites and disease. But none of that mattered. This small, scared creature had found him, and he wouldn't turn it away. He shared his meager rations, offering sips of water from his canteen. The puppy drank greedily, then licked his fingers with a trust that humbled him. "You need a name," he decided, looking down at the small, sleeping form nestled against him later that night. The stars were brilliant, distant pinpricks in the ink-black sky, mirroring the tiny spark of life he now held. He thought of the companionship he craved, the camaraderie that was a soldier's lifeline. "Buddy," he said aloud, the word feeling right, solid. "That's what you'll be. My buddy." The memory, so vivid, so real, brought a fresh wave of grief. The weight of that tiny puppy in his arms, the promise of companionship it represented, now felt like a cruel trick of fate. He opened his eyes, the familiar living room slowly coalescing around him. The silence was still there, but now it was punctuated by the ghost of a soft bark, the phantom swish of a tail, the echo of a loyal heart that had beaten beside his for so long. Buddy. His buddy. Taken from him, just like that. The desert night, a vast, whispering tapestry of memory, now shimmered with the stark image of Buddy. No longer the skittish pup Henderson recalled, but a honed, sinewy shadow moving with decisive grace. Henderson, a younger man then, had watched his transformation, each passing week etching deeper musculature onto his frame, kindling a keener intelligence in his eyes. Buddy remained a constant, a furred extension of their unit, his quiet presence an unofficial comfort on patrols. He'd absorbed their rhythms, the subtle inflections of hushed conversations, a silent sentinel whose instincts sharpened daily against the unforgiving canvas of the land. One particular night, the air hung heavy, thick with an unnamed tension that even the seasoned soldiers couldn't quite decipher. Henderson was on watch, his gaze sweeping the monotonous horizon, where dunes blurred into indistinct shapes beneath a sliver of moon. A soft, insistent nudge against his hand broke his concentration. He stroked Buddy's head, accustomed to the dog's quiet companionship. But then, a low, guttural whine, unlike his usual contented murmurs, rumbled from Buddy's chest. His fur bristled along his spine, ears swiveling, twitching towards the inky blackness beyond their perimeter. Suddenly, Buddy barked. It wasn't a playful yip or a warning growl. It was a sharp, piercing cry that ripped through the stillness, echoing across the vast expanse. Before Henderson could react, Buddy was tugging at his pant leg, frantic urgency in his pulls. The bark had jolted the others awake, a ripple of movement and hushed curses spreading through the makeshift camp. Henderson, his heart now hammering a frantic drum against his ribs, caught a metallic gleam in the distance, a fleeting reflection in the faint moonlight. "Contact! East flank!" he bellowed, his voice raw with adrenaline. The camp erupted. Sleeping bags were flung aside, weapons snatched up, the rhythmic click of bolts being pulled back filling the air. The soldiers moved with practiced fluidity, their training kicking in. A volley of gunfire erupted from the shadows, tearing into the sand where they had been moments before. Dust and debris exploded around them as they scrambled for cover, returning fire with controlled bursts. The exchange was fierce but brief. The attackers, their element of surprise shattered, melted back into the darkness as swiftly as they'd materialized, leaving only the acrid scent of gunpowder and the ringing silence that followed. Adrenaline still coursed through Henderson's veins, making his hands tremble slightly as he checked on his comrades. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt. As the immediate danger subsided, the unit gathered, faces grim but relieved. Sergeant Miller, a man of few words and stern demeanor, clapped Henderson on the shoulder. "That dog of yours, Henderson," he rasped, his voice tinged with something akin to awe. "He saved our hides." A chorus of agreement followed. "Never heard him bark like that before," one soldier muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sounded like he was yelling 'incoming,'" another added, a shaky laugh escaping his lips. Henderson looked down at Buddy, who now sat calmly beside him, his tail thumping softly against the sand. The dog met his gaze, eyes reflecting the pale moonlight, and in them, Henderson saw not just loyalty, but a profound understanding. Buddy had known. He had sensed the danger lurking in the darkness, a threat that had eluded even their trained eyes and ears. He had given them the precious seconds they needed, the warning that had meant the difference between life and death. From that night forward, Buddy wasn't just a companion. He was the guardian bark, an unofficial mascot whose presence brought a quiet reassurance that transcended the harsh realities of their deployment. Henderson felt a surge of pride, a deeper connection forging between them, an unbreakable bond tempered in the crucible of a near disaster. The memory, sharp and vivid, brought a fresh wave of agony. That same guardian bark, that protector, was gone. Loyalty in the face of fear. The desert sun, a malevolent eye, beat down on Henderson. The air, thick with dust and the metallic tang of fear, tasted like ash. They were clearing a cluster of mud brick buildings, the kind that offered perfect cover for unseen threats. A sudden, sharp crack echoed, not the familiar thud of an IED, but something smaller, faster. A searing pain blossomed in Henderson's left shoulder, flinging him against the rough wall. His rifle clattered and he slid to the ground, a gasp tearing from his throat. The world tilted, then narrowed to a tunnel of agony. Buddy was there in an instant, a blur of tawny fur and focused intensity. The previous week's ambush, the one where Buddy had earned his moniker, the Guardian Bark, still hummed in Henderson's memory. But this was different. This wasn't a warning. This was aftermath. Buddy's usual alert posture, ears pricked and body coiled, was replaced by a more primal concern. He nudged Henderson's head, a soft whine rumbling in his chest. Henderson, his vision blurring, felt a warm, wet tongue on his hand, a frantic, comforting gesture. The pain in his shoulder was a hot iron, consuming everything. "Buddy, go," Henderson rasped, the words catching in his throat. He tried to push the dog away, but his arm was a dead weight. Buddy didn't budge. He settled beside Henderson, a warm anchor in a rapidly chilling world. Then, a new sound cut through the ringing in Henderson's ears. A series of sharp, urgent barks, unlike any Henderson had heard from him before. These weren't the deep, resonating warnings of a threat, but a high-pitched, almost pleading cry for attention. Buddy barked, then nuzzled Henderson's face, then barked again, a desperate symphony. Faintly, Henderson heard shouts, the hurried scuff of boots. His unit. They were coming. Buddy's barks intensified, guiding them, a beacon in the chaos. He pressed his face against Henderson's cheek, a soft, vibrating warmth. The pain was beginning to overwhelm him, pulling him into a dark current. He felt distant hands on him, the gentle jostling as they assessed his wound. A medic's voice, calm and efficient, cut through the haze. "Got a clean entry. Looks like an exit. We need to move him." As they carefully lifted Henderson onto a stretcher, Buddy became a living barrier. He paced alongside, low growls rumbling in his throat, his eyes fixed on Henderson. When a medic tried to gently guide him away, Buddy sidestepped, refusing to break contact. His loyalty was a palpable force, a protective shield. He licked Henderson's face, a damp reassurance. Even as they loaded Henderson into the armored vehicle, Buddy tried to leap in after him. It took 2 soldiers to restrain him, their hands firm but gentle, understanding the dog's distress. "He's not leaving you, Henderson," one of them said, a small smile touching his dust-caked face. "Never seen a dog so attached." Inside the vehicle, Henderson, his mind swimming in and out of consciousness, could still hear Buddy's frantic whines, a mournful lament as the distance grew between them. He imagined Buddy, straining at his leash, watching the vehicle disappear into the shimmering heat. A pang of something akin to guilt, then a wave of profound gratitude washed over him. Buddy hadn't just warned them. He had stayed, a steadfast guardian, a furry sentinel until help arrived. He was more than a dog. He was a lifeline, a silent promise of unwavering devotion in a world that offered so little certainty. The memory, sharp and vivid, brought a fresh sting to Henderson's eyes, a ghost-limb ache for a loyalty now tragically absent. The hero's medal. The scent of lemon polish and a faint ghost of stale pipe tobacco still clung to Lily's clothes as she pulled away from Mr. Henderson's quiet street. The old man's words, few and heavy, had painted a canvas of profound loss. But it was the silent dignity in his eyes that truly resonated. There was a story here, far grander than a simple animal dispute, and Lily felt its pull with an almost magnetic force. Back at her apartment, The city lights blurred beyond her window as she hunched over her laptop, a mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten at her elbow. She started with a broad search. Military service dogs, German Shepherd, desert war zone. The initial results were overwhelming. A torrent of articles and documentaries about canine heroes, each story more poignant than the last. She filtered, narrowed her focus to the specific time frame Henderson had mentioned, the details of a remote outpost, the constant threat of IEDs. Hours bled into one another. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing names, unit designations, and even the unique markings Henderson had described on Buddy's fur. The military record system was a labyrinth, but Lily was tenacious. She delved into archived news reports from that era, looking for any mention of a German Shepherd with an unusual valor. Then, a flicker. A small, almost overlooked article from a niche veterans journal. It spoke of a canine hero, a loyal companion who saved countless lives during a particularly brutal deployment. The description, while vague, sent a jolt of anticipation through her. She dug deeper, chasing the thread. Slowly, painstakingly, the pieces began to fit. Unit commendations, individual bravery citations, and then, unmistakable in its clarity, a photograph. A younger Mr. Henderson, his face etched with the grime of war, but a gentle smile playing on his lips, knelt beside a powerful German Shepherd. The dog, alert and majestic, wore a simple service vest. It was Buddy. There was no mistaking the intelligent eyes, the particular pattern of his sable coat. And there, beneath the photograph, was the citation. Buddy, officially designated Military Working Dog MWDK 9721, had been awarded the Dickin Medal for animal bravery, the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross or the Medal of Honor. The article detailed how Buddy, despite being severely wounded during an ambush, had dragged a fallen Henderson to safety, then returned under heavy fire to retrieve vital communications equipment, all while continuously barking to warn his unit of approaching enemy combatants. He had not only saved Henderson's life, but had prevented further casualties, guiding the medics through a hail of bullets with an instinct that defied mere training. Lily stared at the screen, a profound sense of awe washing over her. This wasn't just a dog. This was a decorated war hero, a creature of unparalleled loyalty and courage. The irony twisted in her gut. This brave, dedicated animal was currently impounded, accused of being a public menace. The injustice of it burned. With renewed purpose, she shifted her focus to the animal control report. The complaint, supposedly from a Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle, cited repeated aggressive behavior and a specific incident of Buddy snapping at and attempting to bite a child. Lily remembered Henderson's quiet insistence that Buddy had never harmed anyone, his voice laced with unshakable conviction. Now, armed with Buddy's military record, that conviction felt like absolute truth. She cross-referenced Mrs. Periwinkle's address with local police reports. Nothing. No calls about aggressive dogs, no reported bites, no disturbances involving a German Shepherd on Henderson Street. She even checked medical records, searching for any emergency room visits for dog bites in the vicinity during the time frame of the alleged incident. Again, a blank. The accusation was a phantom, a whisper of malice without substance. The truth began to coalesce, stark and undeniable. The complaint against Buddy was a complete fabrication, a malicious lie designed to strip Mr. Henderson of his last most cherished connection to a past he rarely spoke of. Lily closed her laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in her determined eyes. This was no longer just a story. It was a mission. Buddy wasn't just a dog. He was a hero. And Mr. Henderson deserved to have his hero back. She had to expose this injustice, not just for the quiet veteran, but for the unwavering spirit of a dog who had given everything for his country. The story spreads. The scent of lemon polish and disinfectant still clung faintly to Lily's clothes as she drove away from Mr. Henderson's small house. It was a clean scent, but one that couldn't mask the underlying quiet desperation that had settled over the veteran. His dignity, even in profound grief, had struck a chord deep within her. The truth, raw and undeniable, burned within her, demanding to be told. Back at her cluttered desk, surrounded by stale coffee cups and crumpled notes, Lily found a fierce focus. She typed, the rhythmic click of the keys a counterpoint to the storm brewing in her mind. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, weaving together Buddy's heroic past with Mr. Henderson's silent suffering. She described the Dickin Medal, the highest honor for animal bravery, detailing the harrowing accounts of Canine 721's unwavering loyalty under fire. She painted a picture of a German shepherd who had not just been a companion, but a guardian, a silent sentinel against the chaos of war, saving human lives with his instinct and his famed guardian bark. Then, with a cold fury, she laid bare the fabricated complaint. The anonymous call, the vague accusation of aggression, the swift, unfeeling confiscation, all contrasted sharply with the dog's decorated history. She wrote of Mr. Henderson not as a victim, but as a man of quiet fortitude, his pain expressed not in shouts, but in the emptiness of his gaze. She ended with a powerful call to action, a plea for justice, for a hero to be returned to the man who had loved him, fought alongside him, and now mourned him in silence. The article wasn't just news, it was an indictment. The next morning, the press's word, the Midland Tribune, hit doorsteps and newsstands, its front page emblazoned with a striking photo of Buddy in his military harness, a stark juxtaposition to the headline. Hero Dog Impounded, a veteran's silent plea. Across town, Mrs. Gable, sipping her morning coffee, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She read about Canine 721, a decorated war dog, and her eyes welled up. Her own grandson was serving overseas. Mr. Jenkins, a retired mechanic, adjusted his spectacles, his brow furrowed in disbelief as he absorbed the details of Buddy's heroism and the flimsy pretense for his removal. He remembered seeing Mr. Henderson walking his majestic shepherd, the dog always so well behaved, a picture of calm strength. Anger began to simmer. At the local diner, conversations stalled. Patrons exchanged glances, their morning banter replaced by hushed, indignant tones. A decorated war dog? And they just took him? Someone muttered. That poor old man, another chimed in, remembering Mr. Henderson's quiet, solitary presence at the weekly market. The phone at the animal control office began to ring. At first, it was a trickle, confused inquiries. Then, as the morning progressed and the story spread like wildfire through social media and word of mouth, the trickle became a torrent. The receptionist, usually dealing with lost cat reports and barking complaints, found herself overwhelmed. "I'm calling about Canine 721, a woman's voice, tight with emotion, demanded. "You can't keep a war hero in a cage." "He saved lives," another caller shouted, his voice cracking with indignation. "And you're going to just discard him?" A gruff, no-nonsense voice declared, "I served, and I know what that bond means. You give that dog back to Mr. Henderson, or there'll be hell to pay." The empathy was palpable, but so was the anger. People who had never met Mr. Henderson, who had only seen Buddy as a stately German shepherd on a leash, now felt a fierce protectiveness. They saw not just an impounded animal, but a symbol of injustice, a disregard for sacrifice, and a profound betrayal of trust. The narrative had shifted. The quiet veteran and his heroic companion were no longer just a local story. They were a cause. The demand for Buddy's return echoed through the phone lines, a growing crescendo of public outrage that could no longer be ignored. Justice served. The scent of lemon polish still clung to Lily's jacket as she walked into the town hall, a stark contrast to the palpable tension that filled the air. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls, their faces a mixture of anger, concern, and fervent expectation. Mr. Henderson sat in the front row, his back ramrod straight, his hands clasped over the polished wood of a walking stick. His gaze was fixed on the empty podium, a silent testament to the quiet dignity that had so moved Lily. He hadn't spoken much since she'd arrived, only a brief, grateful nod when she'd shown him the day's newspaper, Buddy's heroic face staring out from the front page. The meeting was called to order by Mayor Thompson, his voice strained, clearly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of public outcry. He introduced the head of the local animal control department, Mr. Albright, a man whose normally jovial demeanor was now replaced by a grim, defensive set to his jaw. Albright launched into a lengthy, bureaucratic explanation of protocol, impoundment procedures, and the anonymous complaint received. His words, however, were drowned out by murmurs and a few outright shouts of dissent. Lily waited for her moment, her heart thrumming a quick rhythm against her ribs. She clutched a worn leather folder, inside which lay Buddy's meticulously preserved military records and a small, tarnished silver medal. This wasn't just about a dog. It was about respect, truth, and the unwavering bond between a soldier and his companion. When Mayor Thompson finally called her name, a hush fell over the room. Lily approached the podium, the crowd parting slightly to let her pass. She could feel Mr. Henderson's eyes on her, a silent plea for justice that fueled her resolve. She began by recounting the anonymous complaint, the fabricated details that led to Buddy's confiscation. She described the arbitrary nature of the seizure, the lack of due process, and the devastating impact on Mr. Henderson. Her voice, initially steady, gained a passionate edge as she spoke of the injustice. Then she held up the medal. "This," she announced, her voice resonating through the hushed hall, "is the Distinguished Service Cross. It was awarded to K-9 Sergeant Buddy for acts of extraordinary heroism in Afghanistan. Sergeant Buddy didn't just bark. He saved lives. He located IEDs, he protected his handler, and on multiple occasions, he faced enemy fire without hesitation." She laid the medal carefully on the podium, its silver catching the fluorescent light. Next, she produced the stack of official documents, military commendations, in a veterinarian's sworn statement attesting to Buddy's perfect health and gentle temperament. She read excerpts detailing specific missions, the lives Buddy had touched, the countless dangers he had averted with his guardian bark. Each word painted a vivid picture of a hero, not a menace. A wave of murmuring swept through the room, this time not of anger, but of awe. Faces turned towards Mr. Henderson, now seeing him not just as a grieving veteran, but as the keeper of a legend. He remained stoic, a slight tremor in his hands, the only betrayal of his profound emotion. Officer Miller, who had been present during Buddy's confiscation, sat expressionless in the back, seemingly unaffected by the revelation. His flat gaze, devoid of any discernible emotion, was a stark contrast to the rising swell of empathy in the room. Lily concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. Sergeant Buddy is not a threat. He is a decorated veteran, a loyal companion, and a hero. To keep him impounded under false pretenses is not just an injustice to Mr. Henderson, it's a dishonor to his service and to every man and woman who has sacrificed for this country. She stepped back from the podium, leaving the medal and the documents as silent witnesses. The air crackled with anticipation. Mr. Albright, his face now pale, conferred briefly with Mayor Thompson. He then returned to the microphone, clearing his throat nervously. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice hoarse, "it has become abundantly clear that a grave error was made. The information provided in the initial complaint was, as Miss Chen has demonstrated, entirely false. We deeply regret the distress this has caused Mr. Henderson and the community." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Effective immediately, K-9 Sergeant Buddy will be released into Mr. Henderson's care. We will personally ensure his safe return this evening." A roar erupted from the crowd. Cheers, applause, and shouts of "Justice!" filled the town hall. People surged forward, eager to shake Lily's hand, to offer Mr. Henderson words of congratulations and support. Mr. Henderson, for the first time, allowed a small, grateful smile to touch his lips. He looked at Lily. His eyes, though still shadowed with past pain, now held a glimmer of hope. The long, silent vigil was finally over. Home at last. The fluorescent hum of the animal control facility pressed down with an almost sterile finality, a stark contrast to the lively, affirming chaos Mr. Henderson yearned for. He gripped the crumpled release form, its edges softened by endless worry, his knuckles bone white. The air, usually a blend of disinfectant and low-grade anxiety, now thrummed with a different anticipation, an almost electric prelude to joy. His heart, a leaden weight for weeks, now beat with an unfamiliar lightness, a fragile butterfly stirring after a long winter's sleep. A young woman, her gentle demeanor suggesting a volunteer, greeted him at the reception. "Mr. Henderson? He's ready." Her voice, soft and respectful, was a welcome relief from the brusque efficiency of his prior, fruitless visits. She guided him down a narrow corridor, the linoleum floor gleaming. Each step echoed, lending an air of unreality, as if he walked through a dream too precious to fully believe. Then he heard it, a low moan, instantly recognizable, resonating deep within him. It was a mournful, questioning sound that swiftly escalated into an excited yelp. His pace quickened, his carefully maintained composure threatening to shatter. He rounded the corner, and there he was, Buddy. Confined within a clean, yet undeniably cramped kennel, Buddy was a golden blur of motion. His intelligent eyes, usually so steady, now gleamed with an almost frantic elation. His tail, a golden whisk, hammered against the metal bars with a rhythm that promised to shake the entire building. A joyous, unrestrained bark erupted, filling the sterile space with vibrant life. He pressed against the enclosure, his whole body trembling with eagerness, a boundless, natural force straining for release. "Buddy," Mr. Henderson whispered, his voice thick with emotion, barely audible over the dog's exuberant cries. He knelt, fumbling at the latch, his fingers suddenly clumsy. Buddy, sensing liberation, began to leap, his front paws scrambling at the gate, his nose pushing through the gaps, desperate to reach his human. The moment the latch snicked open, Buddy exploded forth, a golden streak of pure elation. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause. He launched himself directly at Mr. Henderson, who, despite his readiness, was nearly toppled by the sheer force of the dog's affection. Buddy's front paws landed squarely on Mr. Henderson's shoulders, his lean body pressing against the old man's, his head burying itself in Mr. Henderson's neck. He licked furiously, tiny, warm licks tracing paths across Mr. Henderson's cheek and ear, tasting of reunion and profound relief. Mr. Henderson, usually so composed, felt an unfamiliar dampness on his cheeks. They weren't only Buddy's licks. They were his own tears, hot and undeniable. He wrapped his arms around Buddy, holding the powerful dog close, burying his face in the thick, familiar fur. The scent of Buddy, a mix of outdoors, dog, and an essence uniquely his, filled his senses, anchoring him back to a reality he'd feared was irrevocably lost. He clung to Buddy, as if afraid the dog would vanish, a phantom of his longing. The warmth of Buddy's body, the insistent thumping of his tail against Mr. Henderson's back, the soft whimpers of pure contentment emanating from the dog. It was all gloriously real. "My boy," Mr. Henderson choked out, his voice hoarse with emotion. "My good boy." Buddy pulled back slightly, his eyes still bright with happiness, then nudged his head under Mr. Henderson's arm, urging him forward, towards the exit, towards home. The leash, a simple nylon strap, felt like a lifeline in Mr. Henderson's hand. He clipped it to Buddy's collar, a mere formality. Buddy remained glued to his side, his hip bumping gently against Mr. Henderson's leg with every step, a constant, reassuring presence. As they emerged from the sterile building into the crisp afternoon air, the sunlight felt warmer, the breeze softer. The world, which had seemed muted and colorless for weeks, now blazed with renewed vibrancy. Buddy trotted purposefully, his gait strong and confident, every now and then casting an upward glance at Mr. Henderson with an expression of profound loyalty and joy. They walked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the rhythmic pad of Buddy's paws on the pavement and the gentle rustle of leaves in the trees. Mr. Henderson's hand instinctively found the top of Buddy's head, stroking the soft fur, a silent conversation passing between them. Buddy leaned into the touch, a deep, contented sigh escaping him. The journey home, usually a familiar routine, felt like a triumphant procession. Each familiar landmark, the old oak tree, Mrs. Gable's meticulously tended rose bushes, the corner lamppost, seemed to greet them with a quiet cheer. Mr. Henderson's shoulders, which had carried the weight of a profound, unspoken sorrow, now felt lighter than air. He looked at Buddy, trotting faithfully beside him, a hero in disguise, a legend in their quiet town. and a steadfast companion by his side. Home, finally, was not merely a place, but a profound sensation, a joyful reunion, a deep sense of belonging.